Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today with the Association for Project Management. And you've joined our webinar today in conjunction with PIPMG and Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. So we're delighted to have so many of you here today. We can see that there's people joined all over the world. So wherever you are, thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing campaign that we've been running at APM, which is aligned to really raising the awareness of project management within the life science, healthcare and pharmaceutical sector. So today's title, as it says on that front screen, is Making the Transition from Scientist to Project Manager. So delighted that we have Jim Ramsden from Dr. Reddy's and John Folks from PIPMG. So I'm Gavin Spencer, as it says on the screen there, and before I go into too much detail, I'm going to tell you a little bit about APM, but just to mix things up a little bit, we're going to include some polls with a new system we've got in place called MentiMeter. So if you've got a smartphone where you can scan a QR code, then do open that up and have it at the ready. Alternatively, what you can do is visit menti.com and enter that code there, so 52129713. Very straightforward. I'll come back to it again in a moment because I'm sure there'll probably be some people joining us later on, but it'll be good to just incorporate that in today's webinar and just to get your views on some of the things that we'll be talking about. So, as I said a moment ago, just going to tell you a little bit about APM. For some of you, I know there's a lot of our members on the session today, but for the benefit of those of you who may have never heard of APM before, we are a not-for-profit educational charity. And simply put, all of our activity is really designed to promote project management and improve the profession. We were founded in 1972, so for those of you who are quick with your maths, you'll be able to figure out that this year is our 50th anniversary, so there's plenty of celebrations going on, and we're based in Princes Risborough in Buckinghamshire in the UK. And much like you may well have heard of a chartered surveyor or a chartered accountant, APM, being a chartered body, is the only organisation that can accredit people as far as being a chartered project manager. So we're highly proud of that fact. So a quick slide there just to show you some of our members, and I'm sure you can see there's a wide cross-section of organisations who are involved with APM. We've got about 38,000 individual members, about 550 corporate organisations, and they really cover every sector from government organisations, government departments, construction, education, healthcare, professional services, legal services, you name it, they're involved in working with APM in one way or another to upskill their staff and align themselves to the profession. So hopefully some of you or most of you have been able to open up the MentiMeter platform. So I'm going to bring up the first slide here, really just as a tester to kind of get things going, and I'll drag that over. That's the idea, and hopefully we can see if any of you are tuned in and if this works. So here goes. Right. He brings over his second screen. Right, I can see that we've got about 16 people who are in there already, which is fantastic. So let's go in. There's 18. That number's growing. So let's just test this out first of all. So, question to you: your view with regards to the sector or your organisation, really, and you should be able to cast at least one vote there. But where is project management within the life science, healthcare and pharmaceutical sector right now? Your view on that, please. So we've got 4 options there. We're yet to embrace it. Our organisation, we feel, is way behind the construction sector, who are obviously very advanced, or we're just waking up to the importance of a structured project management. And then the last one is that our organisation is fully embedded and using project management. So we've got some stats coming through there, which is it's good that it's working. So it gives us some percentages, so we can see that the numbers are increasing. So we've got about 44% of the audience so far who are logged into this who are just waking up to it. So that's, I think, a great a great answer, really, which kind of it helps us with this presentation, because we can see that it's not just companies from life sciences, pharmaceutical sector who are in this session at the moment, but this is really leaning towards that sector, and it's interesting to see the mix there. Numbers there creeping up on the organisations fully embracing project management. So that's excellent. Fantastic. Okay, right. We'll come back to MentiMeter in a moment. So I'll move on with that. We'll obviously be able to share this information post-event. But here we go. What I'm going to do is hand over to our first speaker. It's John Folks. He's from PIPMG, which stands for the Pharmaceutical Industry Project Management Group. From my understanding, he founded it in the 1990s after a successful career, from my memory, with the Wellcome Foundation, which many of you will know is now GSK. So, John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Gavin. Thank you. Shall I share my slide set right now and get started?
Please, yeah, go ahead. That's wonderful.
Okay, so let's cross my fingers and do that. And hopefully you can now see my slide set. And let me just continue, so the introduction, if you like. I actually can't take credit for actually founding PIPMG, but I've been involved with it a long time. Back to that in a second. Yeah, I am a consultant and trainer with experience in the pharma sector, but actually more relevant, I've worked with lots of project managers, project teams, and in particular, people who are making a transition to do at least some project management out of sort of being a scientist. Like many people of my ilk, as well as being on the board of the PIPMG, I work for a small training company called PIPMG, confusingly, in our sector. And also I work with a consulting company called Feteros. But all in all, the best way to get me, if anybody's interested, is on my LinkedIn, which has all of that in it, and that's my address there. So to get started, what I'd like to do is highlight my view of the differences between a scientist role and a project manager role in our sector, which can be scary for the person making such a transition, and move on to think about how we can make that perhaps slightly easier. So first of all then, to say that often the candidate for someone who may become a project manager in our business is a scientist that has become recognized as an expert in a particular functional discipline and has got a track record, let's say, of responsibility and achievement. They will often be a team leader. They will line manage more junior scientists. They have authority over some resource. That may be a budget of some kind. They may run a lab. They will schedule work for people. They will set objectives for people. They resolve the many problems that come up technically and scientifically for them using deep knowledge gained over many years. But when and if they start as a project manager, things might be a little strange. Let's go up one there. And just to say that many of you on the call may be highly familiar with this, but some of you might not be in the project management world. Some of you are visitors, and very welcome ones, from outside of the life science sector in this webinar. But you certainly might agree that things seem a little strange. Let's highlight a few aspects of that. Well, as in many projects, a team is a diverse mix of experts, and there has to be such a so-called cross-functional team to provide the range of skills to bring an asset, if you like, through a development path. In our sector, this diversity is quite wide. So the first issue is that the project manager may know very little about the other team members' disciplines. They will be hard experts, and he or she, the PM, may not know really much of what they do and certainly couldn't do it. To add to this, and it's not really shown in this list, but it's a reality that these experts in the team frequently work for other teams as well. They work for more than one project at the same time with other project managers. Okay, to add a little bit more complexity, the project manager is typically not the commanding officer or the boss of the team. They're not set up by the organization to give direct instructions to people. They're more like coordinators, if you like. Now, if this mix, the typical matrix type of setup that some of you know very well, sounds like it might give rise to misunderstandings and conflicts, you're right. We've been working in this way in our sector for, to my knowledge, 30 plus years, and it causes problems, disconnects and arguments and inefficiencies to this day. Many organizations are trying to change this. They're trying to adopt, let's say, agile project management principles, but it's in our sector, it's a slow burn really, this type of thing, and this structure pervades us and is a reality all the time. Well, the problems are often people problems. They're often a whole mix of senior people, senior stakeholders with conflicting opinions and things like that, decisions being made, decisions being changed, and the project manager needs to use influencing skills and political skills often to solve problems, and this is often what they describe as the uncomfortable reality. Now this can be quite scary, but we're interested in your views, and I think we're going to jump, before we do that jump, go into the poll, another poll, just to say, if you are a person that's recently made this transition or thinking of making this transition, or very likely if you can remember some years ago perhaps when you did make the transition, what did you find most scary? So Gavin, is that ready to go? I think the poll is in the Menti page now, so some of you perhaps that can have a go at it for us, perhaps complete it.
There we go. Yeah, that should be live.
Now, I wasn't particularly surprised, I don't think, as these results start coming in. And the most common issue is that scientists are used to being experts. They're used to their staff, if you like, not knowing as much as they do. They're used to being the doyen, if you like, the master of the discipline. And dealing with that uncertainty of people who have got things going on in our brains that you don't understand is often the most difficult challenge. But there's lots of others. Leading with without direct authority, another tricky thing. Thanks for that, everyone. So let's just unshare that poll if we can, Gavin. Will that get back to my slides again? Or do I need to reshare? Yes,
I
do.
You might need to reshare, John. Yeah,
it's no problem. I can do that directly. Okay.
That's okay. There were a couple of answers there in the chat as well, which were under other. So I can see some failing or identifying risks and projects failing. Other, for me, the project management tools do seem a good fit for the projects within a very clinical program.
What would be great, Gavin, is if we can get back to some of those things. And just to say, everybody, I'm not sure if we'll get much of a chance for some questions between myself and the next presenter, James. So it be best to say any questions, fire them into the chat, please, and then we'll take them when we can. So we need to help people with two things in terms of this transition: helping people understand if they're suitable for this type of role, and secondly, helping people develop the skills and the capabilities that they need to make a success of it. Okay, so just a little bit of clicking at this end. So let's just say, next slide. Now, it's important to say there are many different ways to understand sort of people's approach to the world and people's skills and capabilities. This is not the only model. I quite like this simple model, which is called the social styles model. It's a typical 4-box thing with 2 axes. The left to right axis is the degree of assertiveness, and top to bottom, the degree of responsiveness that you have. Now, I'm going to briefly skip over a detailed explanation of this for questions of time, but just to say that in a sec, I'll show that there is a link to a questionnaire that you can take. It's free, and it has a lot of explanation in it. But you may well have seen these things, and I've got to set some context in a second, because we often associate types of styles with this and give people sort of silly nicknames, if you like. But it emphasizes the fact that people are naturally comfortable with a particular type of style that they can use easily to resolve problems, and particularly when they're under pressure. And we give them some nicknames sometimes. Now, interestingly, many people who are science orientated, who start as scientists in the business, are in the top left box. They're analytical types, analysis, thinking methodically, looking at data, resolving technical problems, if you like, is often why they were hired in the first place. They are experts in this sort of thing. They come in this way. And we'll say more in a second, but a tool like this you may well have seen, like a DISC insights analysis, Belbin team roles. They're all driven from the same model, roughly. And they're often team tools that are used to examine the mix of work personality in the team to head off any potential conflicts and imbalances. But sometimes we can use this as a personal tool. Let's explore it a little more. Just to say, in the slides that you'll get, or we can share it with chat at the end, the link to this questionnaire, which you can take. It's only sort of 10 minutes or something. And just to say in advance that it's hosted on a domain called conquer.com, which is a technical partner of mine. So that's what you'd expect. So, why does someone want to be a project manager in the first place when they're a successful scientist? Well, it might be a variety of reasons. Over the years, they've derived more pleasure and satisfaction from the people parts of their job than the technical parts. They're very receptive to listening and to others' views and ideas. They can coordinate things. They feel that sort of innate skill developing in them, and a desire to focus on big picture, end goals and visions and things like that. They may think it's time to move on from a role which is based around data and detail. Now, actually, they've often already by this time moved their style. So those arrows indicate that they're moving in a sort of people-y direction and an big ideas-y direction. Now, this is not always what we see, but it's very often what we see. And it's actually very common, and it's very admirable. We need these skills in our business. Data people, experts, sometimes, unfortunately, tend to fight with each other and wage war over ideas and things. And these people can pull things together. So this is initial suitability for work, but it's often, if you like, the foundation of a little bit of a problem. Project managers will face challenges, delays, confusion, tricky decisions, things being not delivered when they should. They will often meet these looking at this, if you like, mode of this analysis by being extra helpful and supportive. They'll channel their passion for achieving and delivering things, but really into extra work for themselves. They'll work harder, they'll pedal faster like the swan's feet under the water to make sure things are done. They can wind up sometimes being a little too supportive. If you like, moving from something exemplary, which is providing, say, friendly but firm encouragement to people, to a role where, instead of that, they're running around filling the blanks. They're ending up doing other people's jobs for them, helping people out by, if you like, doing things that the team members say they haven't got time to do, and this can be a very damaging spiral to get into. If you like, it's too helpful, and it's often the big barrier. So how do things have to change in some cases? Just a little bit of stage management with my stuff here. I've got a disappearing mouse, unfortunately, sometimes. God knows why, but here we go. Sorry, everybody. So what might spoil this sort of cozy picture of things? Well, and how do they need to develop? Essentially, the first thing they need to do is have a mindset of the right relationship between themselves and the team members and the team members' functional departments. And it's easy for people to forget that team members have their own line managers, and their own line managers are there to support and develop them and to make sure that they're providing the right services to a project. Now, I sometimes try and get a project manager to envision their role as being like an orchestra conductor. So look at the conductor of an orchestra. They don't actually make any noise. It's the other people that make all the sound. They're there to sort of bring it out. So, if you like, the PM's first duty is to achieve the task, but it's the team members that are going to deliver the work packages that make it happen. So essentially what we say is that the key challenge for the project manager is to so-called hold senior people and team members to account in the teams for delivery and delivery of the work packages and so on. Now, if you look at the arrows on this diagram, this means developing a little bit more of a tough action focus here, reminding team members of their obligations to deliver, and sometimes causing a ruckus, if you like, if that's not happened, and sometimes escalating it. So it's a little bit more of a sort of tough role. But the real challenge is, can this be done by sort of giving people direct orders? Well, no, as we said earlier, the project manager isn't empowered to do that often. So can we do this at the expense of the people skills? No. We have to, at the same time, do the things like listening to people and make sure we've built a cohesive and collaborative, friendly team atmosphere. And the challenge for the project manager is encapsulated in an interesting sentence to close off this slide, which is, one has to be ruthless with the demands of the task, but at the same time, very gracious with people. And it's an interesting, I don't know if you can see my picture at the moment, but it's a very interesting, I'm holding two fists up. It's a very interesting balance to strike, and quite a tricky one. So faced with this challenge, and people having to get out of their comfort zone, how can we help them to develop? Well, first thing to say is that I've met many people who, when asked about their, if you like, their job description, the expectations that are set on them by the senior leadership when they move into a project management role, this is not clearly expressed. They don't have this encapsulated in the way they should do their jobs. So it's often they're having to find ways themselves of developing things from, trainers and coaches and internal people and so on. How is this done? Well, of course, training. We can have simulations and role play and feedback on a training event to get people out of their comfort zones in a safe environment. Many will say that they learned a lot from senior colleagues, mentoring. I've been there and done it for 20 years. I can help you. I can advise you what to do in this sort of situation, that sort of situation. Don't worry about saying this, and this to this guy, because it's not going to cause you a problem. I can tell you that. Another great thing to do is, if you like, team coaching, a team session where the project manager and their teams exchange feedback. What's working? What isn't working? What do we want from you? What do we don't want from you? What helps in terms of the way you do things and the way you lead? Obviously, people behind all of this can take qualifications. APM certainly has a whole range of excellent qualifications that people can study and take, which will fill in the background to all of these skills. And lastly, the organisation that I am proud to be part of, PIPMG, runs many events, webinars, and now back to live events. We're going again, where we give opportunities to network with like-minded people. So I don't have too much more to say, but let's do one more poll. And just to say, if something helped you in the past from this list, what helped you most, do you say? It might have been a mix of all three, but if you can choose one, what would you say would be the most help? Has been the most help? And again, it's not really surprising. And sometimes that mentoring, which some of you are highlighting as the best thing, comes about naturally in an organization. People simply network, and senior project managers are frequently all too pleased to share their expertise. And sometimes in organizations, formal mentoring programs are set up so that people can be assigned somebody senior, typically two levels above them, and not in their direct line of management or something. That's an ideal thing. I'll just say one last thing as I finish. In another organisation, for Teros, we've just developed something interesting, which is a questionnaire about cross-functional leadership capabilities, like an audit, which you can try out and get a little bit of feedback on about the various skills of cross-functional leadership. Again, if you get the slide set given to you, you can click on that link, or we might put it in the chat at the end. Again, it's a beta version. It's not fully validated and fixed yet, but you're welcome to try it and give us some feedback.
Absolutely.
So thanks very much for that opportunity, Gavin. So we'll review the questions whilst James is presenting and address them at the end. So.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I know we've got a slide there for questions, but if you've got any questions, we'll hand over to James now, and then once James has given an update, we'll go back and to the floor and take questions. So James is about to share his deck, but a brief intro. So Jim's Ramsden from Dr. Reddy's, who since leaving Oxford University with a PhD in chemistry has held a number of academic postdoctoral and industrial roles, and is here with us today. So Jim, over to you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, John. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Gavin?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, can you see the slide?
Yes, fantastic.
Okay. Okay, so yes, I'm a project manager with Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Limited. Dr. Reddy's are a generics pharmaceutical company. Their head offices and most of their manufacturing is in India, in Hyderabad, but they have some manufacturing and an R&D site in Europe. And I'm based out of their R&D site in Cambridge. Most of the work I'm involved in is currently in generic APIs, but I'll touch on some of my sort of history. I'm here as a member of APM and PIPMG. So how did I get to where I am? So as Gavin pointed out, my background is as a PhD chemist. The early part of my career really had a very academic feel, postdocs in Utah and Oxford and Sheffield. And then in '97, which seemed like a long time ago now, I moved into industry. And I started with what is effectively my current employer as a senior research scientist in '98. And I think that's the first thing in asterisk in there. I've had quite a lot of roles in quite a lot of companies, but I joined one company that's changed its name, it's changed its owner, but I'm working along, to some extent, the same people I was working alongside in '98. So it's one of those strange kind of changes. So I was taken on board as a technical specialist. And for the first few years, I was just buried in my technical work, doing the science really in the lab at the bench. But the natural expectation was, as a senior scientist, that I'd be expected to be supporting commercial people in evaluating and pitching for projects, working quite closely with the customer as a reassuring technical specialist who could answer their technical questions, and also dealing with sort of manufacturing or supply chain, the people actually scaling things up or sourcing materials. So why change? I think it was one of the points that John raised. Why did I change? I was working in a very, very specialist area in asymmetric catalysis. And after a number of years, I was working on a lot of projects that was very, very similar in using this particular technology to make fairly advanced high-value intermediates, but not much beyond that. And I was developing a feeling that that kind of work would be potentially limited in the long run, that it really was going to be doing that kind of work. And so there was time for a change. And so around 2011, the opportunity came up to take some of these skills I'd already been developing, which were kind of a bit project manager type, and actually transition formally to a project manager role, which is, I say, what I did in 2011. Still working on the same kind of projects, so very high value pharmaceutical intermediates using asymmetric catalysis. Now at this point, I was very lucky, and I think being lucky is always a good skill to have. In that over those first couple of years, I was able to spend a lot of time working within relatively small projects, really establishing those foundation project management skills, and learning who to go to get help in these areas. Again, lucky, the projects were high enough value to be important, but really none of those projects were so big or complex that they had the potential to fail badly. So nothing too big or too difficult. So I'm just focusing a bit more on that sort of Venn diagram. The organisation, as it was then, really didn't have a lot of PM resources or a PM office. So there was some other PMs, project managers within the organisation. So there's quite a lot of organic learning, but then a lot of self-learning. And a couple of things I picked up on this was that looking at those overlap areas between different areas, that's where friction tends to arise. So you need to keep an eye on those areas, and you need to start to understand them. But also, it's a place where a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of solutions are formed within a sort of cross-functional teams. But there are big things looming that you need to become aware of. anyone in the pharma industry probably know what all these initials stand for. If you're outside the pharma industry, it's not that important what the initials actually are, other than there's a lot of functions out there, which I think a point that John made is that you're working with a lot of people who have a specific job to do on your project, but also the same job to do on a number of other projects. So you need to coordinate their activities within their job function with the things you need to get done on your project. So generally speaking, these big blue things that are lurking over the horizon, you're not going to know much about them. And to be honest, you will never know enough. And it's a question of focusing on learning the stuff you need to know, finding the interesting stuff and the important stuff that's going to be the most impactful on your project. As I say, in my earlier projects, we was developing a very strong team who I was unfortunate to work with on some bigger projects as my career developed. What I did do in those early days, and it's a bit of a game, but I'd recommend it, is when you're in these meetings that you've running a project, it's worth thinking about who are the smartest people in the room, who are the people who get stuff done, who in the group can answer difficult questions honestly. These people are your new best friends. They are going to be the foundation of successfully running a project, and you really need to embed them in your stakeholder analysis. And if you've got a good working relationship with them, you can also start with them to address the more serious issues. Where are the weak links? Where are the functions that are overstretched? And then how are you as a team, and particularly that core team, how are you going to handle these problems which exist on all projects? As I said, we didn't really have a very strong formal PM structure, so there's a lot of organic learning, and a bit of a plug here for APM. About that time I joined APM, I got the APM handbook, which I still refer to this day. It's very useful, and also within APM there's a lot of tools you can download offline that I found very helpful. So what I was generally doing during these early days is building my skill set, strengthening the things that worked well for me, particularly the tools that worked well for me and the other key stakeholders within my projects, particularly external stakeholders. At that time, most of my projects, we had an external paying customer, and they're the best sort of customers to have, to be honest, because ultimately they're paying for it all. When it comes to prioritising work, you can go to them and you can get a very clear answer. This is what needs doing next. This is what needs doing now. So having got those foundational skills, about 10 years ago, I started moving into projects where really we started very, very big projects. And rather than just making intermediates, I was becoming involved in projects where we're making API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So the involvement of all these other functions now become absolutely critical on a day-by-day basis. There's really nothing there that you can park and come back to later. Everything has kind of got to move together. So again, having this strong team developed in the first few years was invaluable at this point. I continue to develop and build the toolkit, my project management toolkit, and that's still an ongoing process to this day. And a word of warning now, and this really reflects on John's comment earlier. There was points when I was having 2 or 3 big projects in various phases of development and manufacturing, a lot of reporting with internal stakeholders and to customers, and this was a period in my professional career where I really was working ridiculously hard, lots of upskilling as well, and there was a few months at this time when I was putting in 5.5-day working weeks. So a lot of work to be done, and I would concede John's point. A lot of that work I was doing because other people were either overstretched or was saying they were overstretched, and I learnt a lot about how to try and get stuff done without burning out at that point. But it's worth pointing out that everybody in these functions and their functional managers, commercial, manufacturing, everybody wants the project to succeed. So essentially everybody wants you to succeed as a project manager. Really, in my experience, there's never been anybody trying to undercut what we're trying to achieve as a team. Again, I'd emphasize these interface areas. Again, the same thing, it's where problems arise, but it's also where solutions arise. So in recent years, I've moved away from this external projects, working with an external customer, and I've now moved into our core business, which is generic APIs. And so I've now got, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but got these little core projects in the middle. At any one time, I'm going to have a couple of ongoing projects with a full set of team members involved. At any one time, you're also closing out some of the activities on the previous project. Now, for some of those activities, some of those functions, the day that part of the project finishes, that's it, they've gone, they've moved off the project onto something else. There'll be other people who you'll be involved with for weeks or months, and occasionally for years in previous projects. But also you're starting to look at what's your next project. Can you start gathering information and people working on the future project, so you can hit the ground running with that one in the future. I think one of the things we were thinking about when we were discussing this talk with John and Gavin is what do scientists, or what can scientists bring to project management? This is very much a personal view from myself, from my own skill set and my own history. And as I say, I'm a chemist. So scientists, chemists, they can be very, very good, very focused on getting things done, delivering stuff, rather than just making sure they've got a beautiful process, in a beautiful project management process. They're very focused on delivering results. A strong drive to learn and apply new stuff. And something I learned very early on in my career is that with sufficient guile, ambition, stubbornness, and hard work, you can actually get most things done. And even if you can't get everything done, you won't be faulted for want of trying. Chemists, scientists, they can be very, very good with working with experts from different fields, with different technical approaches and different solutions. But there is a flip side to that I should come on to. So what are the bad things that scientists, and particularly chemists, can potentially bring to a project that you need to watch out for? As a chemist, I need to make sure that I'm not biasing towards solutions from chemistry. You've got to take solutions from the whole range, from the whole team. You mustn't let brilliant chemistry or other sciencey solutions, say from engineering, put other people in a difficult position by putting something in front of them that they just find it's a nightmare to implement. One thing I've found with chemists over the year, probably more than any other scientist, is it's very easy. If you're not a chemist, you're probably not familiar with this, but a chemist can sit at their desk, decide to do something. They can be at their bench doing it minutes, literally minutes later, without any thought, planning, and a consequence of that is they can bring an awful lot of conformational bias, which harks back to that earlier thing, that problem that chemists are very good at jumping to conclusions and proving they're right without regard for really proper, thoroughgoing science. And I've seen that put back projects for months because the chemists have determined that that's the answer and they're not going to listen to everybody else. And so they can be ignorant of solutions for other experts. And again, that's something I would commend to you. Again, circling back to my earlier point about those experts who are really good at getting things done and delivering results. They are your best friends. They will be able to pull off the shelf solutions for problems that you thought as a chemist was impossible.
The slides are not moving.
They're not moving. I'm sorry.
I think you might be on. I can see slide 4, Jim. I'm not sure if you've moved it on or if they've stalled or not.
I do beg your pardon. It must have stalled. Right. Have I stopped sharing? Just let me unshare and reshare. Sorry about that.
No problem. I wasn't sure if you'd moved them on or not.
I'd been moving them on, so
Right.
has that changed?
No, still the same one with the 4 circles, the Venn diagram.
Okay. We've moved on a lot since then.
Do you know what number slide you should be on,
I
Jim?
was on number 9, so I've missed quite a few.
Gavin, perhaps you might have to share from your end.
Yeah, let me try that, but I think they're numbered slightly differently, so you might just need to tell me where we're at.
Okay, so that's my slide.
26, that is.
Yeah,
That was my slide 7, so I'm on to 2 slides beyond that, and I was about to move on to my final slide.
1, 2. Is that where you need to be, Jim?
Yeah, so I was going to move on to the last slide now. If you could move on to my final slide.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is, I've cribbed off John's earlier slide just to give my view on some of these things, which, again, some I'd strongly agree with. In my experience, the training I had, relatively little formal training, and that's kind of a question I'd put out there to people is, particularly those who've had experience of transitioning with quite a lot of formal training, whether they think that's positive or less positive. I think the other thing, I had quite a long scientific career before moving into project management, and I'm sat next to a younger colleague here who's has a few years experience, but is looking to transition at a much earlier stage than I did. And again, I'd be interested in people's thoughts on whether, you know, is there a too early, is there a just right, is there a too late to transition? Mentoring, so I had some mentoring from senior colleagues. Feedback and discussion, yes, with the team, and it's always very, very good to go to talking to your team members, particularly in functions you're less familiar with, and just talk to them. What can you do as a project manager that's going to make their life, going to make it easier for them to deliver? You can't promise them anything, you can't promise them everything, but at least you know what's going to be, what they think they're going to find helpful. Senior stakeholders are invaluable, and particularly in my early career, I was very fortunate to be working with external senior stakeholders, so customers. And customers, as I say, they're absolutely brilliant for letting you know what they think you should be doing. Qualifications. So, as I say, not a lot of formal training, but then I've followed up with APM qualifications, sort of on the experiential background to get my MAPM. I would say that previously I've been a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry. I've essentially dropped all that. I'm a project manager now. I'm not really a chemist. That's, you know, in my background, but what I am now is a project manager. Networking. We've got some project managers in our business, quite a lot in India. Very much in my part of the business at the moment, they're focused very much just on a somewhat one-dimensional. We just have to, you know, we have to deliver stuff. A lot of very good input networking from outside my industry through PIP, very much focused on the pharmaceutical industry. APM is very useful for getting kind of an outside-in view of the kind of problems we face from people other project managers in other industries who face similar issues or different issues, and can introduce you to different solution sets. So I think that's basically it. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry about the slide disconnect there. I think somebody's asked whether the slide deck will be circulated. I think they will be, won't they?
They will, yeah. I'll make sure that we follow up with the slides. I'll get a survey out as well. But thanks for everyone's input into the chat. We've got a couple of questions there. We've probably got about 5-6 minutes to run through some questions. So if I can kick off with the first one, I can see it's from Ashok Singer. Question: looking at the financial return on effort, would a converted scientist to project manager get paid more or less or the same? Hence, if the two options than the driver is own satisfaction or some other intrinsic driver. In my view, unless a substantial financial increase in the pharma science industry will always lag behind other industries. Am I wrong? Who wants to take that one on? John?
Gavin, perhaps I could answer that. And I think we'll have to consult our lawyers before we actually go on record and say project managers get paid more than, people staying in the science area. I can take you to lots of organizations where that is not the case. I think you have to say that, say two things. First of all, someone becoming a project manager and developing that role is somewhat equivalent in organizational terms to someone rising as a manager within their own function. So becoming, say, a section head, or alternatively, going out of the line, if you like, from being a team leader into being a project manager. They could be seen to be somewhat similar. I think, however, and I read into the chat, there was lots of discussion about it. One of the big issues in our industry, and it's still there, is actually how we regard the status of project managers and senior functional line managers in our business. And in a lot of companies, if you look at the organization chart, you'll only see the functions and you won't necessarily see the project managers stitched in there. And project managers do have this experience that they don't count, if you like, as much. They don't have as much direct authority as the senior functional heads, head of clinical or head of this or head of that and the other. Does this cause us to lag? I think, yes, it does, actually. It is a confusion and a bit of a mess that our sector has introduced into the world of industry, and it's still a bit sort of unresolved. There are some companies where project managers are genuinely given very high status and they are seen as, the very top guys bringing products to market, and other times where they're seen as more sort of, coordinators who have to struggle a bit. I think certainly, however, I think you have to decide what you want to do. At the end of the day, if your thing is, collaboration, working across rather than up and down, working to try and, harmonize, pull things together and look at the big picture, project management will be for you.
Fantastic, thank you, John. And that kind of relates to that first slide about where people's thoughts are with regards to obviously the sector lagging behind some of the others. Got another question here. The perennial conflicts between management and scientists is well documented within the social psychological literature on the motivation of scientists and engineers, autonomy, exploration, divergence versus delivery, governance, convergence. How have you guys managed this conflict and how do you position yourselves? Jim, do you fancy taking that one on?
Yes, I think I'm reasonably clear in my own mind is that some of this comes down to styles of leadership. I'm very fortunate that most of the vast majority of the time, the people I'm working with are world class and they're recognised as such by their senior management. So basically, you give them the tools to get the job done and they will do it. And part of that is resolving the conflict between management and scientists. And my view has always been to come down on the side of the scientists. If you give them, if you give them the tools, if you make sure those tools are fully utilised, they're going to get the job done. In my experience, if you're trying to get them to do work on too many projects, not enough resource, or if you're giving them not enough hardware, it's very difficult for senior management to make the case that, just because they haven't got the tools, they should still be able to do the job. So you've got to choose somebody, you've got to strike a balance. My balance tends to be towards, one, the scientists, and two, if it's an external customer, the external customer. And certainly in my organisation, most of the senior managers, most are scientists, and fundamentally they get it, as long as you take the time to explain why they need the resource, why they need more time, why they need more money. But if you get all those things, if you get more time, more resource, more people, that just puts you under even more pressure. You have to deliver. You can't ask for more stuff and then...
Okay, excellent, thank you. I did have a question. I think it links into one that's in the chat there, which is about the time to transition. And the question here is, do you have any advice for a final year PhD student in computer science willing to land a project management role after graduation? Do you think it's too early and better to start as a scientist and then transfer internally to a management role? So yeah, timing.
I can just mention that, Gavin, and say that the answer generally, I think, is yes. I think most project managers have to operate with a degree of earned respect from their teams. It's not just about learning the processes and the techniques of project management and then going straight into a role. I think mostly project managers, certainly in our sector, are derived from people who have served their time as scientists or technicians or commercial people or clinical people, or whatever, demonstrated their capability there and developed a deep knowledge and then moved. And there's in our sector, that credibility is still very important, I think.
Fantastic.
I'll just add something to that, and it circles back to that earlier discussion about money. Certainly from my own personal experience, as a senior scientist, you come in, you develop your career, you have a salary. When you transition to project management, you're transitioning at least on the same level, and then building those increments beyond there. So I think, having that experience also helps in terms of how your career is going to develop financially.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm conscious of time. There are still a few questions there, and maybe when we wrap things up, we can come back to those ones directly. But I'm just going to start to wrap things up. There's a couple of important updates I just want to be able to share with you. There's a couple of events that APM are running. The Power of Projects. It's a full one-day conference. I know there's people who've tuned in all over the world, but if you're in London, taking place June the 9th, Park Plaza. We've got a very relevant speaker to this session today, because we've got Kathleen Green, OBE, who was the manufacturing lead at Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So she'll be talking about resilience, motivation, collaboration, and agility. So a great opportunity to network, spend time with colleagues, and now that the world's starting to open up, it's obviously a great time to kind of get to meet people face to face. The APM Awards, they're taking place 21st of November, but they're very much open for entry. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, then please take a look at the website. And hot off the press, while I was speaking with John earlier this morning, our next webinar in this series, again aligned to raising awareness of project management in the life science sector, is going to be focused on risk management. So we've got a lady called Pauline Stewart-Long, former VP of Project Management at GSK. She's going to be talking on August the 2nd there. So very much looking forward to that. The contact details for our speakers are there on the screen along with mine. I'll send out details of a survey, and I know everyone gets surveys and uptakes, often mixed, but with this being part of a wider campaign, we have got a lot of activity that's taking place aligned to the sector. And I say the sector is in healthcare, pharmaceutical, and bioscience sector. And what we're really looking to do is we've developed a sector landing page, which has just gone live. There's video show reels, which we've invested in and had built. We've got a sector business roundtable event taking place in June. There's going to be podcasts on change management and articles in the APM Project Journal. But for that to continue, it's really important that you share your views and input in really telling us if we're getting it right, and sharing details of those future topics. But at the same time, if you'd like to get involved in that campaign of activity, or if you'd like to know more about APM and how we can work closer with you, then just drop me an email. But I think at this stage, I just want to say a huge thank you to Jim and John, and obviously to all of you for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you at another one of our sessions again in the near future.